What is going on, you guys? This is DerekJ Speaks, and we are here to talk about AEW Double or Nothing 2025 live in Phoenix, Arizona, or Glendale, Arizona to be more specific. The show just went off the air not too long ago. Another very, very long AEW pay-per-view, of course, but on the plus side, it was a very good AEW pay-per-view. Top to bottom, this was a very strong show from All Elite Wrestling, capped off with two Owen Hart Cup Finals, with Mercedes Moné winning it for the women and Hangman Adam Page winning it for the men, both getting their spots in the main event championship matches at All In Texas this July at Globe Life Field Stadium. Not to mention, this show also gave us an unbelievable match with Anarchy in the Arena, with the Elite and the Death Riders taking on the Babyface crew in one of the craziest matches you'll see all year long. An unbelievable spectacle of a match, if you can even call it that. It had just about everything you can possibly imagine, about everything you would expect with the Anarchy in the Arena matchup we've seen for the last couple of years, and yet they managed to top themselves to a point where I don't know if they can top this next year, but I'm sure they'll try. Elsewhere on the show, you had a couple of other really good matches, a few other matches that really didn't need to be on this show. That is the continuing issue that I have with most of these AEW pay-per-views. As I'm recording this, it is a little bit after 12:30 a.m., and this pay-per-view did not need to go that long. The build-up to this pay-per-view was not that good. The card heading into this pay-per-view was extremely thin, and looking at everything, it did not need to be this long. Some of the matches on this show, some of the ones that were really good even, did not need to take place on this show. I recognize and understand the purpose that some of them served, but even still, not everything needed to be on this show. But with this being a pay-per-view and Tony Khan loving to please his fans and make it worth their while when they invest $50 into these pay-per-views every month or every other month in certain cases, you can say that this was definitely money well spent. But this was quite the show, very long show, a very eventful show, but again, a very good show. So let's go ahead and knock this out all the way at the beginning. We'll kind of just gloss over the 0 hour pre-show. We had a tag team match with Anna Jay and Harley Cameron beating Megan Bayne and Penelope Ford. And there was an 8-man tag team match that I did not see. I know the crew were involved, or just crew, and Roppongi Vice. So I'm sure it was a fine match for the pre-show. But the actual show itself started off with the finals of the Women's Owen Hart Tournament Cup. And it was TBS champion Mercedes Moné taking on Jamie Hayter. First time ever matchup between these two. I knew it was a long shot. The idea of Jamie Hayter walking out the winner of this match, I was holding out a little bit of hope, but I knew exactly what was going to come from this. But I also knew that these two had the ability to put on a great match, and as they started things off, the crowd was pretty quiet in the beginning, but the two of them worked very well together, and they got the crowd firmly invested into everything they were doing, especially Jamie Hayter. Mercedes did her job well of getting heat, but Jamie, with a lot of the big power moves, she really brought it in this match, and I definitely felt watching her looking at the Jamie Hayter of old before the really bad injury that took her out for 15 months. She was on a roll, just killing it in matches and her presentation. And we really haven't seen that side of her since she came back last year. And I felt like this match really brought that out of her. a few slip-ups here and there. At one point, she was trying to bounce off of the steel steps on the outside to deliver a clothesline. She kind of slipped up a little bit, but she recovered nicely enough. It's a Mercedes Moné match, so you know there was a bunch of Meteoras, and Jamie herself was going for that haterade several times throughout the entire match. We had a bunch of backbreakers with Mercedes working over Jamie's back, but Jamie still fighting through it. She had a lariat, she had a tombstone, both things kicked out of by Mercedes, and the finish came down to a very brutal sequence here where Jamie was going for that haterade clothesline one last time, and Mercedes managed to duck it, and she transitioned into basically a tornado DDT. She was going to turn it into a roll-up, but in the process, she spiked Jamie right on top of her head and still got the roll-up and got the win. So Mercedes goes over in this match. She is the 2025 Women's Owen Hart Cup Tournament winner, and she punches her ticket to a Women's World Championship match against, and I'll just say it here, Timeless Toni Storm at All In. Possibly, not even possibly, I think it is for a fact the biggest match you can possibly do in AEW on what is quite possibly their biggest show of the year. The two biggest, most strongest booked characters in the women's division in AEW colliding. They just both so happen to be the top champions in the women's division. So I knew the likelihood of Jamie getting a win over Mercedes, or even just the idea of Mercedes losing on this show, especially with none of her championships on the line, was very slim, but it's fine. It is what it is. I wish we could have gotten Tony versus Jamie Hayter. I wish they could have revisited Mercedes and Athena. I feel like they just dangled that carrot in front of us and they moved on. Maybe they'll come back to it again. Maybe not. I don't know. What we got when we got it was pretty good. And this was good here. This match, a great way to open the show. Another great pay-per-view match from Mercedes Moné. And yeah, I do think that she and Tony are going to put on a great match. I am intrigued by how the build-up is going to go. Mercedes is not the strongest promo character in the company, but Toni Storm is. So we'll see if she can carry this into a pretty good story, into a great match that a lot of people are already kind of campaigning to close out the show at All In. We'll see how the next couple of months go with the build-up and the stories being told, and I'll say it right now, if the plan's to keep that championship on Jon Moxley past All In, you better main event the show with this match. Up next, we had a tag team match where FTR with Stokely Hathaway, or just Stokely, apparently, in their corner, took on the team of Nigel McGuinness and Daniel Garcia. This is a story that has involved Danny Garcia, Nigel McGuinness, Daddy Magic, and even Tony Schiavone. It's been playing out on Collision for like the last month. I don't really watch Collision that much, so I haven't paid that much attention. I've seen bits and pieces of it, and you know, I appreciate them telling the story with FTR and giving them something to do on a weekly basis, on even if it is on Collision. And even with this match, they were trying to tell a story here with Daniel Garcia getting heat on him, picking on Schiavone on commentary, Schiavone even checking on Nigel at different points. And by the way, Nigel looked really good in this match too, but at certain points he was down on the floor, and Tony Schiavone got up from commentary and was checking on him and, you know, aiding him and getting bullied and harassed by FTR and Stokely. All that stuff is good. It's good character work. FTR, they are great heels. There was a time where they were the most over baby faces on the planet. That time has long passed. They were due for a refresh, and them going heel here has done wonders for their characters and their personalities, and they play it up really well. This match just went on way too long, in my opinion. I didn't clock it, but a lot of the matches on this show went very long. And for a show where the card was as thin as it was, the fact that the show still went off the air at 12:30 in the morning because so many of these matches went so long is a big part of that. And this is one of those matches where you could have shaved a good 5, maybe even 7 minutes off of it. Probably would have been better for it. You could have still told the same story, but it is what it is. Dax got the win for his team. He locked the sharpshooter on Daniel Garcia, kept it in there for a long time. At this point, Nigel was still out on the floor. He was trying to crawl his way back in, but he just couldn't do it. And instead of tapping out, Garcia passed out. But that was enough to give the win to FTR. I don't know if this story with these guys is going to continue past this. Obviously, we're just waiting any day now on the return of Adam Copeland. I don't know if the rumors and the speculation of them reuniting Copeland and Christian, they don't have a whole lot of time to build that story up. Although, I don't know how much time you think should go into it, but if they're going to do that, they're going to have to bring these guys back to TV at some point to build that story. And even Christian has his own story going on with Nick Wayne and all that. So I don't know if that's still the direction, but whatever they do past this point, hopefully we can kind of get FTR away from this story with the announcers and Daniel Garcia. We had a stretcher match up next between Mark Briscoe and Ricochet, paying homage to the recently deceased Sabu in a very famous stretcher match that he had with RVD in ECW at an event that just so happened to be attended by a young Tony Khan. So they didn't outright say this was a tribute match, but that's basically what it was. And it was every bit as violent as you would expect for a tribute match to a fallen ECW legend. Briscoe got some juice in this match. He started bleeding. Pretty bad gusher, if you ask me. But before that, we had a funny spot where he pulled out some cleaning supplies from under the ring and he sprayed them on top of Ricochet's bald head and even had a rag and was wiping it. So more bald jokes at the expense of Ricochet. I like how Mark Briscoe has now grown out a mohawk to be able to avoid having any bald jokes against him. Because for a while there, he also had no hair, but he started growing out a mohawk. So there you go. But between the two guys in this match, obviously Ricochet probably needed the win more, and he got it. We had some scissors come into play here. We had one pair that Ricochet had that got taken from him by Mark Briscoe, but apparently Ricochet had another pair, and so he managed to get Briscoe. And the way this match was set up is you had to place your opponent on a stretcher, wheel them over to the front of the arena here, and throw them into an ambulance and shut the door. We didn't really get all of the wheeling on the stretcher part of it, but eventually Ricochet did lay out Briscoe. He used a second pair of scissors on him, hit him with a low blow, hit him with a spirit gun, and then tossed him inside the ambulance and shut the doors. Gave himself the victory. His first pay-per-view win since coming to AEW. He was 0-6, and now he's 1-6, so good for him. After this, we had the AEW Tag Team titles on the line. The Sons of Texas and the Ring of Honor Tag Team Champions, Sammy Guevara and Dustin Rhodes, taking on the Hurt Syndicate with MVP and MJF out in the corner. MVP was on commentary. MJF was the corner man at ringside. They've been playing the story with MJF and the Hurt Syndicate for several weeks now, and he finally joined, and he's just a part of the crew right now. I have no idea where this story is going. I am still intrigued. I thought, it was going to go this way, and they never went that way, and they've just been playing it straight so far. Even in this match, they were kind of teasing tension at first, but with MJF and Bobby Lashley. But by the end of it, Lashley was just buddy-buddy with MJF. MJF tried to interfere. Lashley stopped him, but he still gave him a fist bump. And, despite their best efforts, no one possibly could have believed that Sammy and Dustin had a chance in hell of winning this match. Of course they lost. Shelton got the pin on Sammy. And I'll be honest with you, I was only partially paying attention to this match because, as most of you know, Double or Nothing was airing alongside NXT Battleground. And so around the time that this match started, there just so happened to be another match on Battleground between Stephanie Vaquer and Jordynne Grace for the NXT Women's Championship. And I felt more compelled to tune into that match than watch this one. I had it on the background. I was loosely paying attention, but I was more invested in that match. Stephanie hit a spinal tap, or spiral tap, I should say. Not spinal tap. That's something completely different. She hit the spiral tap and got the win over Jordynne Grace. So sorry for the spoiler, but Stephanie, still the NXT Women's Champion. I'm sure they kept the belt on her so she can work the Worlds Collide show in a few weeks as champion. And she got a big win here. Also, I'll just mention it here. Later on in the night in the main event, Trick Williams defeated Joe Hendry to win the TNA World Championship. Trick Williams is now in the history books as a TNA World Champion. So, there you go. Depending on how you feel about this NXT TNA partnership WWE TNA partnership, if you can call it that, and the influx of TNA stars on the NXT show, and more so, if you're a diehard TNA fan, seeing all these NXT people on your show, I imagine there's mixed feelings on this, but I'm assuming this is leading to Trick eventually dropping that championship to Mike Santana in TNA, who has really come into his own as a big babyface for the brand, and sooner or later will win that world championship. It could be as soon as Slammiversary in a few months. In fact, I would just go ahead and do that and make Trick a transitional champion for that purpose. So, we'll see. All that to say, to show you just how invested I was in the Tag Team Championship match. There's a recurring pattern here with these AEW pay-per-views where you look at the card and you look at matches that probably didn't need to take place on the show. More often than not, the Hurt Syndicate's matches are one of those matches that doesn't need to take place on the show. Problem is, the Hurt Syndicate are super over, and the crowds, even despite them being heels, the crowds love these guys. They love the destruction they bring, so they cheer for everything they do. So it's hard to justify leaving them off of the pay-per-views, but these matches they have, they're just so predictable, and they all kind of just follow the same format too. But again, we'll see where this stuff with MJF goes. Up next, the Continental Championship on the line. Kazuchika Okada defending against Speedball Mike Bailey. This was one of the best matches of the entire night. Again, one of the matches where heading into it, the build-up was paper thin. It really wasn't much of anything heading into this match, but the actual work that these two guys did here was great. Speedball, I'm not super familiar with him. I've seen a few matches here and there over the years, but ever since coming to AEW, this is the most consistent I have seen his work, and he is damn good. And he did something that not a lot of guys have done over the last year. He brought out a real good side of Okada in this match. Not like complete New Japan Okada. I think those days are pretty much done, aside from the Will Ospreays and the hopefully Kenny Omegas of the world. I don't think we're going to get that version of Okada anymore. But in this match, he had his working shoes on, and he was going toe-to-toe with Speedball at different points in this match, which this match, very predictable. We all knew Okada was going to win, but there were some very convincing near falls at different points throughout this match, and it made it very exciting, and it got the crowd very invested into a lot of Speedball's offense here with his kicks, his crane kicks, and a lot of the flips and different offense, the hard, stiff strikes that he was delivering to Okada. They got into it. Even Okada in his spamming of his drop kicks. I mean, it was a little ridiculous after a while, but the man hits a mean drop kick, so I can't get enough of it. But the big finishing sequence saw Bailey go for a moonsault with his knees. He hit it at one point earlier in the match on the apron, a standing moonsault where he just flipped over and drove his knees right into Okada's sternum. So now he's up on the top rope going for the same thing, but midair, Okada hits him with a beautiful, picture-perfect dropkick, hits him with the Rainmaker, and gets the win. Like I said, very predictable outcome here, but still a really fun match. Speaking of predictable, we had the AEW Women's World Championship on the line. Timeless Toni Storm taking on Mina Shirakawa. This, again, one of the more predictable matches of the night. Still, the work was there. These two have worked together before on pay-per-view in AEW. I remember that match being very good. There was a different story with that one, with it involving Mariah May and being torn between these two people in her life. So, different story there. This one was strictly focused on the championship, and I thought they had some great stuff here. Nothing to write home about, but it was a fun match, and it added to an overall really great night of women's wrestling. You had this match, you had the match with Mercedes and Jamie at the beginning of the show. I mentioned NXT Battleground, that match with Jordan Grace and Stephanie Vaquer. That was really good. And they even opened that show with what sounded like was a really great match with Keilani Jordan and Sol Ruka. So, good stuff here from the women's division on this night as a whole. And, yeah. And like I said earlier, Toni Storm, she got the win here. You know, she hit a headbutt and hit Storm Zero and got the win over Mina. But it wasn't a total loss for Mina because her and Toni shared a kiss together after the match. So, obviously, that got a huge pop from the crowd. But all signs now point ahead towards Toni Storm versus Mercedes Moné. And, you know, feelings on these two individuals aside, I know there's plenty of people who do not like the Timeless Toni Storm gimmick and they don't like her. People hate Mercedes. I know they think she just wins everything. She has creative control. She demands to be booked in matches where she always wins and she's going to win every single championship. It is very possible and very likely. In fact, it's an early prediction of mine right now, until I am convinced otherwise, that she is in fact going to win the AEW Women's World Championship at All In. And Tony Khan is just showering this woman with all these championship belts and all these accomplishments and wants to keep her very strong for a very long time. And eventually she's going to drop these championships and lose it to someone, and hopefully in doing so, that puts that person over in a very strong way. Do I think that kind of long-term mentality is going into this decision? Not really. I think it's more short-term and just wanting to make Mercedes the top star of the division. But that's the direction they're going in. I know a lot of people who are really into the idea of this match taking place. And again, with the way that these two women have been booked, they are the biggest stars in their division. Hence why this match is the biggest possible match they can do with the women on a show like All In. So I understand it. And I already said I wouldn't have done this match either. I had my own idea of what I would have preferred. You could have gotten two big matches instead of one, because now with these two hogging both of the main championships in the women's division, it's very likely this is going to end up being the only women's match on the card at All In, or at least on the main card. But we'll see. Up next, I don't even know how the hell to talk about this match, but we're going to do our best. It is Anarchy in the Arena with the Death Riders and the Young Bucks taking on Swerve Strickland, Kenny Omega, Willow Nightingale, and the Opps, Samoa Joe, Powerhouse Hobbs, and Katsuyori Shibata. This was insanity from the word go. We had the baby faces come out, no Samoa Joe at first. The Death Riders come out from different sides of the arena in the crowd, and then they start playing this olden times music, and Justin Roberts pulls out this wrinkled up piece of paper and is reciting this speech talking about the founding fathers, basically, of AEW. And out comes the Young Bucks, who are all dressed up in this old-fashioned garb or whatever. They're the founding fathers of AEW because this is the anniversary, of course, of AEW. The first Double or Nothing, what was it, 6 years ago? Good God, that is unbelievable. But yeah, so we got that. And so the early part of this match was this old drum beat with flutes or whatever playing in the background, because usually with these matches they play music in the background, so that was the case here. Eventually Kenny Omega called for that music to turn off and to change it to something else, and they did. They changed it to the Pointer Sisters, I'm So Excited. Of course, the very infamous song that played as the opening theme music for Dynamite 1 week, and that shit changed immediately when Tony Khan got roasted for it. So my man Tony Khan can make quick changes when people don't like his choice of theme music for his shows, or them changing Mina Shirakawa's theme music a couple of weeks ago. But this whole Death Riders angle, people have been shitting on it for months, and he has just been steadfast with it. So I guess he picks and chooses what he when he doesn't want to listen to fan feedback. But the Pointer Sisters didn't last too long, and Kenny Omega wanted some alternative rock music from the 2000s to play, and of course they played Drowning Pool's Bodies. So Let the Bodies Hit the Floor. That looped a good 4 or 5 times as this match went on, and this match was just craziness immediately. They had, not the entire time, but at different points, like a 4-camera view. If you have certain TV setups, you can do that when you're watching sports. I know it's very popular with YouTube TV, especially during like playoffs or March Madness and stuff like that, where you have the ability to have like a 4-camera view, multi-view of all these different games. They were kind of doing that here in this match, where they were just showing 4 different locations where some of the action was going on, because like always, this action is scattered all over the place, so you get a lot of stuff going on, such as Moxley digging a fork into Will Hobbs' head at one point. We had Yuta getting thrown off of like the top of a concourse down onto a whole pile of bodies, and then Omega hitting a moonsault down onto that same pile of bodies. We had Willow, Nightingale, and Marina Shafir fighting outside. Marina had a glass bottle cracked over her head. We had the Bucks and Swerve fighting on the stage, and Omega came out with a trash can at one point. And then later on the floor, Claudio swung Swerve on the floor and swung him into the speaker that was playing the music. So that cut off the music for the remainder of the match. So that's usually how that goes. It's always a cute little spot on how they manage to cut off the music after playing it for half the match. So we had that. Willow, poor Willow here, she had her earring chained up to the ring post. Marina and Jon Moxley took Willow by the ear, wrapped a chain around her earring, put a lock on it, and chained it up against the ring post. So she was incapacitated for a while. And this is when the heel, I think it was Nicholas, hit a senton basically off of the top of the stage. By the way, the stage and arena setup for this show is pretty good, but Nicholas hit a senton off the stage, crashing down onto Hobbs, crashing through a table. So that took him out for a little bit, until eventually Swerve made the save. He rode out on a forklift driven by someone and he dove off the forklift and dove onto the Bucks. So now he's here to make the save for all the baby faces. Back down by the ring, we get to play with some staple guns. We see the staple guns used here for a few funny spots. One of the Bucks, I think it was Matthew, whatever, he tried to staple Will Hobbs, but that was a no-sell from him. And then Swerve got involved, and he was no-selling it, and he was just kind of going staple gun crazy here on different people, especially as they were trying to hit him with moves, and he just kind of caught him in midair with the staple gun. It was pretty funny, but eventually Marina Shafir came over. She gave him a low blow, and then she stapled his tongue, and that staple in his tongue remained throughout all the way to the end of the match. Eventually, Gabe Kidd made his way out. Actually, before Gabe Kidd got involved in this match, Hook, who we haven't seen on TV in several weeks, he made his return. He got a little bit of revenge on Claudio. He hit him with, I think it was a hockey stick. And then instead of staying around and helping his teammates, helping his fellow Opps, he just left. So that's a story that will be told further in the future. But as I mentioned, Gabe Kidd, he appeared at the end of the cage match between Samoa Joe and Jon Moxley a couple of weeks ago. He is apparently working for Mox, so he appeared here and had the briefcase, and he gave the advantage to the heels. Fighting led over to the ambulance, and out came the same ambulance truck from earlier, and that was a sign for someone to come back out, and that turned out to be Mark Briscoe. Now, a lot of people were expecting maybe an Eddie Kingston appearance here, because the last time we saw Eddie Kingston, it was in a New Japan ring. He broke his leg in a match with Gabe Kidd. It would have made sense for him to come out here, but no Eddie Kingston. Turns out, I guess his injuries are still keeping him from active competition. So we instead got a reappearance of Mark Briscoe, and he was fighting them off. And then a bunch of the baby faces just stuffed Gabe Kidd and the rest of the Death Riders into the back of the ambulance and held the door closed and shut. I guess none of these people could reach the front of the door or the front of the truck where they could, come out of the driver's side of it. I don't know. I thought that there was an opening there for that, but this was clever because it locked the heels away and left the Bucks all alone in the ring with Swerve and Omega. And Omega took one of them down by the entranceway and delivered a one-winged angel off the ramp down through an exploding table. But very quickly, we cut away from that back to the ring where Swerve, who was presented by Prince Nana with some brand new sneakers that had thumbtacks stuck to the bottom of them, and he delivered a Swerve stomp. And it was on Nick Jackson, and he got the win. So the babyfaces get the win here. This match was insane. I don't even think I did it justice going through everything that happened here. It was craziness. The fans were super into it. They hated everything the heels did. They popped huge for all the big spots with the baby faces, all the stuff that made them look cool, which was important here. The baby faces looked cool. They looked smart. They looked competent. So that was great. They didn't get screwed over and be made to look like idiots here. It was good. The heels were made to look like idiots, which was good. And this was a very, very, very fun match. The Death Riders losing on this pay-per-view has me a little scared for what's going to happen at All In, but I don't want to think too hard about that right now, or else I'll cry, so I won't. But on this one night isolated, this was very fun. I am so beyond numb to these big street fight garbage brawl matches in AEW with all the blood. This match was not nearly as bloody as I thought it was going to be. In fact, I think Marina Shafir was probably the only one who really bled in this match. And I think Mark Briscoe got more color in the stretcher match earlier than anyone did in this one. Well, Hobbs bled. Well, yeah, because Mox stuck a fork in his forehead, so of course he bled. But yeah, I don't know. Not as quite as bloody as I thought it was going to be, which is good. But, a match like this, you expect a little bit more. but I was not upset about that at all. And yeah, you get these kinds of matches a lot. You get numb to it. They just kind of all blend together. But this one definitely stood out. It was a lot of fun to watch. It was honestly the favorite match of mine on the entire night. There were probably better technically sound matches, but this one was a lot of fun. What wasn't so fun was the poor guys who had to follow this in the 6-man tag team match up next with the Don Callis family taking on Paragon, Kyle O'Reilly, Roderick Strong, and the TNT champion Adam Cole. And of course, the Don Callis family was represented by Konosuke Takeshita, Kyle Fletcher, and who was it? I don't even remember. The Walking Weapon. You know who he is. This was just whatever. It wasn't that great. It was filler, basically. So you knew what to expect here. These guys, the bell rang. Josh Alexander. Sorry, I forgot the poor guy's name. Josh Alexander. So he was in this match too. But the bell rang, instant silence. No one really cared. They started getting into it a little bit, but nothing special about this match until the finish where Kyle Fletcher got the pin on the other Kyle O'Reilly, to get the win for his team. And then the biggest noteworthy thing about this entire thing was what happened post-match, where Brody King and Tomohiro Ishii came out, accompanied by Hiroshi Tanahashi, to put a beat down on all the heels. And that was that. So didn't really care much for it. It was fine seeing Josh Alexander and Takeshita and Fletcher on the show, but this didn't need to be here. I guess it needed to be here to be a buffer between what we just saw and the main event, but it is what it is. Speaking of that main event, that was up next. Hangman Adam Page and Will Ospreay in the main event in the finals of the men's Owen Hart Cup tournament. And this was great. This was a fantastic match. The crowd was into it for the entrances, but as the match started, they were a little quiet, seemed a little tired, but these two, they're pros. They got them into it. The fans were really behind both. In fact, they were chanting both these guys at certain points, but there were certain times where Ospreay was doing things that the fans were booing. So this seemed like a more pro Hangman crowd than Ospreay, which was good considering who won this match. But at this point, it's too much to really go through every single thing that happened in this match. A lot of craziness. At one point, Ospreay hit a Styles Clash off of the apron down onto the floor, which looked ugly as hell and was one of the big highlights of this match. It's a staple with a lot of these big main event matches these days, not just in AEW, but also in WWE, where you get people hitting their finishers and kicking out of finishers and finishing spam and all that kind of stuff. You got some of that here that led to some big near falls. At one point, they were on the announce table, and you can see the sequence they were trying to do. Ospreay was going for the Tiger Driver, and Hangman was going to reverse it and hit the Deadeye. Only problem is the table didn't want to cooperate, and it collapsed underneath them. I am the table indeed. But back in the ring, we got a really cool sequence where Hangman was going for a buckshot, but it got countered right into a hidden blade, into a Stormbreaker, only good for a 2 count. Then Ospreay hit a V-trigger on Hangman, which Hangman then countered out of a one-winged angel attempt to hit big pressure on Ospreay. So both men using the moves of their biggest rivals. I thought was a pretty cool part of this match. But in the end, Hangman goes for the buckshot one more time, gets caught. Ospreay goes for the Tiger Driver. Hangman slips out of it, hits him with a wicked lariat, and then sets up, hits him with a proper buckshot lariat, and gets the 1-2-3. Hangman wins the match. He is the men's Owen Hart Cup final winner, and he is heading to Texas to challenge Jon Moxley for the AEW World Championship. Probably the best main event match and most satisfying finish to an AEW pay-per-view in many months, probably since All In last year, because ever since then we've had Hangman trying to murder Swerve, we had Moxley basically murdering Bryan Danielson, we've had a lot of stupid Death Riders nonsense. It was very refreshing to not have that close the show for once, and instead we had a really good wrestling match with a very good finish that did not involve a whole bunch of interference and fuckery and shenanigans and all that kind of stuff, and that was good. It was great to see that. So, but this one really could have went either way. I like both men. I would have been in favor of either one of these guys heading to All In to challenge for that championship, especially if they're going to win that championship. But these are two of the biggest stars in AEW. These are your two of the top baby faces that the company should be revolving around going forward. So I thought that they had a great match here. And again, I would have been fine either way, but part of me was kind of hoping for a Hangman win. And as the match was getting started, even with the pre-match promos and stuff like that, it really felt for me that this was going to be a Hangman win. And that's exactly what we got. And I was happy to see it. What Ospreay does from here on out, I don't know. He did say in that back and forth between the two of them on the previous episodes of Dynamite that if it were Hangman going up against the Death Riders, he would have his back. So I assume he'll be a man of his word and have his back. The two men shook hands after the match, so they seem to have mutual respect between the two of them. They didn't kiss like Mina Shirakawa and Toni Storm earlier, so if you were expecting that, sorry to disappoint you. But they did shake hands, so they could be allies up against the Death Riders. And main character Hangman going after the World Championship one more time in his redemption arc here. It would be very poetic if in the end I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people interfering in that match, but if it comes down to Swerve being the real catalyst for Hangman to get the win and beat Jon Moxley, that'd be very poetic. I don't care how it's done, so long as All In ends with Jon Moxley no longer being the AEW World Champion. That is all I care about. I didn't really care who was going to be in that spot. The fact that it's Hangman is great because I like Hangman. He's one of the best characters in AEW. So I am all in favor of that and the story that they can tell for the next couple of months heading into All In with that. Bring it on. I'm cool with it. And again, if Hangman's going to win the championship, let's do it. I'm all in favor of it. He should have been the one to hold that championship months ago anyway, so I'm totally cool with that. But if for some stupid reason they are not going to take that belt off of Moxley yet, then at the very least, please go off the air with Toni Storm and Mercedes Moné. But that's it for me. That covers Double or Nothing. Went a little bit longer than I expected here, but it is what it is. This was a very good show. Beat the hell out of Dynasty last month, I'll tell you that. So, very good show here. AEW as a weekly television product is not very good right now. It's very difficult to get into the shows week to week, but a pay-per-view like this does give me a little bit of hope. Not a whole lot because, again, went way too long, but it is what it is. Hopefully, now that we have a clear path set towards All In, the two big main event matches are set up for that show. Maybe we can start setting up some other big matches earlier than 2 weeks before the pay-per-view like they did with Double or Nothing. Maybe we can start building up some stories to head into the big show of the year and get some excitement and breathe some life into these weekly shows. So we'll see what happens. But whatever happens, I'll be here for All In. I'll be here for a lot of big shows coming up from WWE, what have you. So till next time, like what you hear, like what you see, hit the like button, subscribe, comment, whatever. Follow me on Twitter /X at DerekJ Speaks, and that about does it. I'm very happy to see Hangman get the win here, so hopefully you are too.